There are paper notes in front of you. If you like electronic gizmos, you can download the PDF file from the website and try and keep up with this. I did have a couple people tell me that they are trying to keep up with this. They can't make it here physically. Their work schedule will allow, but they are trying to catch up on it through the week. So, because you were looking at the statistics last week, and like, there's a few. I think that are
during the class. I noticed. Yeah, last week it was two. Yeah, it was one, and then there was a second.
Second.
Yeah, but that doesn't. I think I went on the. I looked at YouTube at another after the fact, and there's people definitely downloading it or doing something after the fact.
So, well, let's pray and we'll get started. First and Second Chronicles, at least most of it. Had to break it up, trying to be a little kind to you as you're reading. But the next couple of weeks, well, actually you will have a break. Next Thursday, we more than likely will not have a class. Diane's surgery is on Wednesday. And unless she's doing really, really well on Thursday, I probably will not do that. And I'll send out a notice. So for those who are looking at this on video, email me, Pastor S.L. @juno.com, PASTORSLHARRIS @juno.com, or go to the website and email me at Pastor. If you let me know, I'll email you as well. My wife's having surgery Wednesday, and it just depends on how she's doing Thursday, whether I can really come over here and spend a couple hours. All right?
One-day surgery?
Yeah, it's a same-day surgery. They're going to rebuild her foot, so they'll release her. Be a long drive home, but actually a better time because they'll have a nerve block in, so it won't hurt as much driving home. I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, we had a lot of people responding. Some ladies are bringing some food over like every other day or every second or third day. Last time that happened, I got fat, so that wasn't good because they want to bring everything and they have desserts, and I don't have any room to get fat, so because I'm already there. Christmas was good to me. So it's trying to get rid of some of it. I actually got a rowing machine in the mail today, so I got to put that together.
Wow.
Because my old one from the 80s, I can't get the parts for it, so start over. And then other people have said they'll come over and help clean, so that's really good. So you can teach the class next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Right.
It's only the end of Chronicles and most of Isaiah.
Yeah, Isaiah is a really easy book.
How thick is it?
Isaiah is like 100 something.
Let's pray and we'll get started in First Chronicles. Thank you, Father, that we can come to your word, and in studying it we are forced to come to grips with your hand in history. And knowing that your hand has been very active in history, we know it's active in the present. Father, that's a reassurance to us that know and love you and follow you, and it should strike fear in the hearts of those who don't. You're very patient, merciful, but Father, you will bring justice to bear. There is a point in time when your patience is worn out and it's time to act. Father, we do desire to understand the lessons that are here in 1st and 2nd Chronicles. See the example set before us, even as 1 Corinthians tells us, that we might take warning from the bad examples and be encouraged by the good ones. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. 1st and 2nd Chronicles cover the same material as 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, except it's a different point of view. Different authors. It's thought that Jeremiah probably was one who compiled 1st and 2nd Kings, and that is before they go into exile. And then right as they get into exile, why has God judged you? That says 1st and 2nd Kings. That's supposed to be Chronicles. I didn't change it. So at the top of this make-believe, that's Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Chronicles is different. It is post-exile, written by Ezra, according to Talmud tradition, and it's written to those who have returned to the land from exile, to explain what happened and God's hand at work. So that means it's written probably about 450, 425 BC, and covering a period from David's reign, 1011 BC, all the way to Cyrus's decree, which is in 538 BC. So the people are back in the land. He's letting them know, here is your history. This is what's happened. The theme, provide the post-exilic nation true spiritual foundations of their theocracy as the covenant people of Yahweh. That was Gleason's Archer's take on it. Yes?
What's that word? Exilic?
Exilic,
What does it
post-exilic, from exile, okay? So post after the exile, okay? Pre-exilic, before the exile. And referring specifically to the Babylonian exile, okay, usually in the literature.
Thank you.
In Hebrew, this book was called the Words, or the Events, the Days, and it was divided like 1st and 2nd Kings was in the translation of the Septuagint. Why? Is speculation. Some think the scrolls were only so long, and they got to that point, so they broke it off there. In the Septuagint, in the 3rd century BC, it was called Things Omitted, referring to all the material in the Chronicles that cover things that were not in 1st and 2nd Kings. Chronicles comes from Jerome's Latin Vulgate Bible, so it has a Latin root. Chronological, the sequencing was the idea. Very different in their emphasis. The simple outline, genealogies, then the reign of David, the reign of Solomon, the kings of Judah. So chapter 1 through 9 in 1 Chronicles, 10 to the end, reign of David, and then to the kings, Solomon, and then Judah. And then all the different kings. And it's only really about the kings of Judah. If there's a mention of an Israeli king, it's only because of a relationship that they had with the kings of Judah, or there's a battle. They're not covering Israel. That's not the issue. The issue is these are people who return to the land, they're back in Judah. Israel is no more as a separate nation. It's back to Judah, a single entity. But as you probably noticed reading through this, you find there's a lot of those who were part of the northern 10 tribes that had migrated to Judah long before, some right after Rehoboam it split, and we'll point that out as we get to it. Kings is prophetic, it's about moral, it's more of a political history. Chronicles is more of a priestly and spiritual, which is why you have all these things going on and on about the temple worship, or what was happening to the Levites. You don't find that in Kings. It's more of a religious history. So I know that's small font, but it gives you an idea. As you compare them back and forth, so first, the continuation of Israel's history from Samuel, the start of the United Kingdom, through the divided kingdom, the fall of both kingdoms. Chronicles genealogy of the nation, an emphasis on the Davidic line. Then its focus is on the southern kingdom of Judah, so different focus. So political history as opposed to religious history. Written by prophets, emphasis on prophetic ministry and moral concerns. So there's a lot more emphasis on the warnings that were coming up. Written by priests, emphasis on priestly ministry, spiritual concerns. So again, you've got all this material about, especially what the Levites are doing, ordering them, and the particulars of the sacrifices. But we'd expect that. Depending on the writer, an author is going to put a lot more about the things that concern them. So a priest is going to be writing about these things. Written by prophets soon after the event, as things are going along. Ezra, long after events are occurred, so he can summarize things and then emphasize what he wants to emphasize and giving these people a history. Kings is more negative. It points out a lot of the rebellion. It will emphasize that rebellion and the tragedy that occurs with it. In Chronicles, you probably notice it's a more positive history, and it gives hope despite the apostasy. In fact, there's a lot of the worst things it skips over. Like, remember, if you get to David, it doesn't mention Bathsheba.
Yeah.
It's just like
that's what I was saying. That
over it.
Doesn't
So
right by.
it's the difference in emphasis because of who they're writing to, why they're writing. And remember, they'd have had 1st and 2nd Kings, so he doesn't need to rehash a lot of that stuff. He's trying to give them an encouragement. Our God is active, he's fulfilling his prophecy, because when you get to the end of 2nd Chronicles, he repeats it twice at the end. In fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy, they were taken away. In fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy, Cyrus makes his decree. So that's a huge part of the difference. So a message of judgment as opposed to one of hope. Message, instead of focusing on man's failings, it's God's faithfulness. So it is very different from each other. So as you get both, then you get a better view of that whole period of history. Okay? Now, Kings, we kept splitting because we kept shoving in the minor prophets as we're going through it. Part of that is because the minor prophets are about warnings of the judgment. And there's a hope of almost all of them toward the end or somewhere in the middle, then at the end it's hope of restoration, hope of restoration. So that fits better with Kings. Chronicles, I hope it helped a little bit just as you're going through it sequentially of kind of putting that all together, as opposed to I kept breaking it off and, well, who was next, who was before, you can see more of the line of what's going on. All right, so starts with genealogy, sort of like going back to Numbers. Hope you enjoyed trying to read all those names out loud, right?
It's easier if you try to do it out loud.
It's easier if you have an audio Bible and you click the button and you follow it as they're pronouncing all these names. Actually, that's helpful. It gives you a better idea of what to do with those names, because unless you work with Hebrew a lot or
Like 9 chapters.
or something, or you have a... When I was a kid, I'm old enough, they didn't have the New Translation. We had the King James, 1769 edition. So the editions that we normally passed out had accent markings, so you could learn to pronounce things. And that was helpful to grow up with that. A lot of the modern translations, they don't do that, so you're kind of really left like, I don't know how to pronounce it, unless you study Hebrew, and then you read it in Hebrew. Because trying to read in English, you're still not sure what to do with it.
Well, even in English.
English gets worse because our rules are so all over the place. So an audio Bible where someone who has practiced this is saying the names actually is helpful. And probably a little more interesting, because one of the things as you're going through all these names, it's like, I have no idea who this is, and you kind of glance over it and then the name, there's no cognition of it. And so later on when you see the name, you don't remember it because you really haven't looked at it. Okay? So that's just a helpful. So Adam to Abraham, and then the descendants of Abraham. And first he starts with those who are not part of the Davidic line. So he talks about Ishmael, and then the sons of Keturah. All right. Remember who Keturah is? Okay. After Sarah died, Abraham married Keturah and had more children from her. So Ishmael is the firstborn. Then he has Isaac, the son of promise. Sarah dies. He marries Keturah. She has more children. So that's who Keturah is. Then it drops down, the sons of Esau. Okay. Who's Esau? Jacob's brother. Okay, so you split that. And then Edom. Okay. The descendants of Esau. So we've taken care of the descendants of Abraham, the larger view, and part of that's important because these people end up playing a role in Israel's history. Often they're the ones they're having battles with because they're all in that area. Okay, next, the genealogy is Israel to David, and so he's going to follow the line of promise. Then the descendants of Caleb are mentioned. I think there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, it's only Caleb and Joshua are the only 2 adults that make the Exodus and enter into the promised land. Everybody else either was born in the wilderness or they were under 20. They're the only 2 adults that made it. Second is Caleb, where he settles, is the area where David is. In fact, one of his descendants is Ephraim and settles in Bethlehem. Okay, and that's the city of David. So you can see there's a lot of mixing there. All right, descendants of Hur. These are the descendants of Caleb's second wife, and as I mentioned, Ephrath is settled the area of Bethlehem, so relatives to the Davidic line. All right, then it goes the sons of David, and then it specifically goes through the line of the kings. You follow me, John?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
tell me what name then.
Okay. Where are we at, the names?
No, I was putting a name in it.
Oh, okay. Caleb.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 7 through 24 is the line from Jeconiah through captivity. So these would be those specifically that could have some possible claim to the throne. Except remember, we find out in Jeremiah, Jeconiah is cursed and he will not have anyone sit on the throne. But this starts being the line of those who would have the right if they could get on the throne. So he traces that. Okay, then he gives a general on each of the tribes, so Judah, Simeon, Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, then Levi, and in Levi, here's where the priestly thing comes up. You notice he expands that greatly. So he gives the line of the high priest, so Kohath descendants through Aaron. Then he gives the Levitical line, so the sons of Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. And then the musicians, and then the Aaronic line, so the priestly line, and then he traces out the Levitical cities. So again, this we see Ezra, priestly, this is our emphasis.
What is that? A lot of line.
Aaron,
Oh.
at the priests.
Oh.
Aaron's the high priest, and the right to be the high priest traces through his bloodline. To be the high priest, you're supposed to be a direct descendant of Aaron. All right? Make sense?
Well,
Okay. So we say Aaronic from Aaron. Okay, and then he continues on. Issachar, Benjamin, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Asher, and Benjamin. And notice that Zebulun and Dan are not mentioned. Manasseh is mentioned twice. Why would Manasseh be mentioned twice? What do you think?
why was he mentioned?
What split the tribe of Manasseh? The Jordan River. Remember, part were up in
some
Gilead,
stayed back.
part were over near Ephraim. So he actually traces both lines. All right? And because Ephraim and Manasseh both of Joseph's line, it's double. So that's how you get the number. Okay? So that's the split.
Why isn't Dan mentioned?
Could be
That's going to be a little bit of a guess.
idolatry, maybe?
Yeah.
Wasn't there?
They remember
In
Dan
Revelation,
is the
they're
most
not mentioned
northern.
either. In Revelations, that they're not
Yeah, they're
mentioned
not.
either.
Dan is the most northern tribe.
Yeah.
Naphtali is next to them. Okay, when we were going through Kings, we saw when Israel was attacked from whether it was Syria, Assyria, or even Babylon, where they come down from first, usually from the north.
Yeah.
Other would attack the south, but they were the first deported. They were deported by Sennacherib, or actually before Sennacherib, Shalmaneser. They were deported early, so it could be is they can't trace.
They're gone.
So we can't figure out the genealogy because we don't know where they are. Now God still knows where they are. Okay, He knows who's descended from who, but He didn't know, so He couldn't trace it. So that would be my speculation. I have to say speculation because we don't have anything that tells us exactly why. And it's just being honest about that. That's a reasonable conclusion, but that's part of it. All right? Okay. Got it? A little bit? All
I
right.
hope it just sinks in with.
All right. Then we're already at the chapter 9. we're moving fast here. Chapter 9, then is genealogies, and this is just concentrated on the remnant that came back. All right, remember from your other studies in Scripture, Cyrus gives a decree. Ezra and Nehemiah both can deal with them coming back, but it's only a small population that even returns. So that's what this one is the genealogies of simply those people who actually came back. And it includes more because some from Israel had come back, so it includes people from other lines, but this is just those who came back to the land. All right? 9 through 35 through 44 deals with Saul. And it's just very brief on Saul. In fact, really doesn't say a whole lot about him other than kind of making mention he was here's the genealogy, he became king, and then the next part is more of establishing David. So it starts with the death of Saul in chapter 10, and it quickly just simply recounts Saul's death and concludes with the reasons that God had rejected him as king and a dynasty from him and instead established the Davidic kingdom. And it becomes important. The descendants of Saul were still alive at that point in time, but they didn't have the right to the throne. It had been given to David. Remember, Ishbosheth wanted to contend that he was going to be king, and eventually he was murdered, and David executed his murderers, but there was others. Remember, he was kind to Mephibosheth.
Saul was murdered?
Saul was killed in battle.
Oh.
Ishbosheth was murdered, his son. Through Jonathan, there was children, so there were descendants of Saul, but they no longer had a right to the throne. So he clarifies that very early on in his chronology. This is why Saul's not part of here and why we're contending with the genealogy from David. David is the rightful heir to the throne. Okay, so David then is made king. And then it talks about David conquering Jerusalem. It gives a recounting of David's mighty men. I always find it interesting. You go through that, and Uriah's in that line.
He's in the 30.
So, and you recount some of the things that these guys do, and they're pretty amazing guys. You know, kill a lion in a pit on a snowy day. You don't have much grip. No problem. And still kill them. You have a spear. Yeah, I'll take on 300. Or in Kings, it actually says 800. I'm not sure why the difference there, but that's still a lot of guys to kill with just you and a spear. These are mighty. These are the guys you want to have as your friend.
Yes.
All right, then it goes in chapter 12 and starts talking about those who were his supporters in Ziklag. So this is before he becomes king. This is during that period of time he's with the Philistines. They're even sent back, and you start looking at how many are there. He actually has a fairly large army. And it even talks about some who were from Israel, not just Judah. They had also come down. David was gaining power long before he became king. All right, then he is made king in Hebron. Ishbosheth is in the north, and which Chronicles doesn't talk about, but David's in Hebron. It kind of just slides over him being in Hebron. Doesn't really even mention how long he's there. He's in Hebron. Here's his supporters in Hebron. The next would be, it just jumps to, now he's in Jerusalem. It doesn't even talk about him, the details of how he conquered Jerusalem and everything else. He's there, and it goes right to the ark. And we know from Kings, that he's been king for a while before he does this. It's in his heart. He wants to bring the ark up to Jerusalem. But it does recount, again, it's a priestly emphasis, they did it wrong. A sinful attempt, and because of that, they were judged, and Uzzah dies. David's upset, says he's angry, and he's, how do I bring this to me? And then it recounts part of his reign, and then goes back, because remember, it was a little while before he went back and got the ark. So it talks a little bit about his reign, him consolidating his power, that he increased his family size, he married more women, and now he had even more kids, a lot of sons, a lot of daughters, and he defeats the Philistines. Now it goes back to the ark. So a little bit of chronology there, but the ark is still a central idea because it's been written, this is written by priests. So to the ark, and this time they do it correctly, and it's celebratory. As they're going, they're making the sacrifices and coming in. Now notice in Chronicles it doesn't talk about Michael, his first wife. Okay, it doesn't talk. It's not emphasizing the negative stuff. It's emphasizing more the priestly stuff and hope. So this is great. We're moving
I think
the ark.
didn't it did mention that she was displeased,
Yeah, it doesn't
but
talk about.
it doesn't go any further than that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just,
there was no confrontation in it. Yeah.
so it's very different, and that just becomes from the emphasis they're trying to make. It's not emphasizing like Kings did. Here's how bad man is. This is more. This is the goodness of God, and the ark is now. They've done it correctly. The ark is here. So they're celebrating chapter 16, and then it moves right to the Davidic covenant, which is a response to David's desire to build the temple. He wants a proper place for the ark. That it should be honoring to God. And God doesn't need that, and he recognizes it. Heavens and the earth, they can't contain God. But he wants something, and he's honored for that.
Yeah, it's his desire, what he wanted for God. He said, I'm living in a house, and I've got all this,
Yeah.
and then the God of the universe, he's in a tent. I just think that's great, the way he
So here's what he wants to do. I want to, and so he is
feels.
recognized for that. But he's a man of blood, so it's not going to be him, it's going to be his son. But in the covenant, it adds in, and he emphasizes this here as well as in 2 Samuel, emphasizes the same thing. This covenant of a future son who will reign on his throne forever. And emphasizes it several times. This is significant. So this is where hope is. And from that point on, David is going to do everything he can to make it easy for his son to do this. His own response to this is bewilderment. He's overwhelmed. How is it that God would honor me this way? He recognizes his own failings, and yet God is doing this. So, sort of like you normally react, right? I can like, God is doing this, right? And that's the way we should be reacting. And he recognized this is God at work. The key elements of this covenant, verse 12, an eternal throne. Verse 13, an eternal loving kindness to him. Verse 14, an eternal kingdom. It's an undeserved honor that's given to him. So that's David's response to this in verse 16 through 27. Go to chapter 18. And it starts recounting David's military successes. Begins with the early victories over the Philistines, the Arameans, the Edomites, and then it summarizes the latter victories: Ammon, Arameans, Philistines, and that includes killing Goliath's brothers and relatives. Okay, there's more than just Goliath. He had family, they were just as large. So he was ready for them, and if I recall correctly, I believe it's one of his nephews is one of the ones that kills Goliath's brother, the one with
6 fingers.
6 fingers,
24 digits,
Right, right.
you know, extra grip.
Thank you.
Okay, 21 through 27, again, the priestly focus, all the preparations David did for the temple. Now, the first thing it mentions, though, in chapter 21 is this census. Joab tries to stop him. We don't need this. God always supplies. You don't need to know what your army size is.
Yep.
But he pressed it. Go do it anyways. Joab didn't do all of it. There were several sections.
Priests.
He did not do the census there.
The priests.
And David recognized as soon as what was reported, like, I've sinned. And God gives him an option. What do you want? And David's response is a good one for us. If we're going to be punished, let us fall in the hands of a merciful God. That's always better. David, please. But in this is the picking out of where the temple would go, because he's at Ornan's threshing floor on Mount Moriah, and is told to offer sacrifice on that place. That is the place where the temple gets built. It's right there. He is a Jebusite, someone who lived in Jerusalem. He had this area, and it's on a rise. There's two canyons on either side of it, so it's in the middle, so you'd have wind that would come up on it, so it's a good place to thresh. So it made a good place for him to thresh, and Samuel talks about buying the threshing floor. Chronicles talks about it, says he bought the area. So there's 50 shekels and then 300. He buys the whole area. So one's the particular area, then everything around it he buys, because that's where the temple's going to be. And that's why the emphasis upon this particular thing. But that comes out of offering a sacrifice, dealing with this judgment that God had placed upon him. Kind of been pretty scary, because he said they could see the angel hovering over Jerusalem. Even Ornan saw that.
With a sword.
They could see the angel, and 70,000 already died, and there's the angel, and we're next.
I'm not getting this one.
Okay.
Recently, or is it?
No.
Oh.
David.
Oh.
Go back in time.
Oh, and the Bible is saying, okay.
Yeah. Not now. If you go to Jerusalem, you're not going to see an angel hovering over Jerusalem. If you do, well, we won't go there.
What is that one?
Well, either you're taking something you shouldn't, or your theology is a little suspect, or
Gotcha.
we're a lot farther ahead in time than we have suspected, and things are happening rapidly. All right. Provisions for materials of the temple, so then it starts recounting that of all the particular things. Large quantities of iron. Don't even know. More bronze than could be weighed, verse 3. Cedar logs beyond number, verse 4. 100,000 talents of gold. That's 7.5 million pounds.
What?
That's a lot of gold. Okay, 1 million talents of silver. That's 75 million pounds of silver.
What now?
Fort Knox
Fort
is
Knox is
nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Bronze, iron beyond weight, and then he sets the stonecutters at work. So he has really prepared for this. This is an incredible amount. All right. No, you can't.
I can't even fathom that.
No, here's the gold I own. That's it.
It's like $3,500 an ounce, $4,000 an ounce. Yeah.
Whatever it is. So.
Oh.
So next he organized. Next, again, the Levitical thing is this organization. He makes charge of the leaders who are going to build the temple, what they need to do, and then he starts going through this organization of Levites. So after David's death, now it switches to concerning what Solomon would do, and he starts to arrange things. So David's at work, because remember, Solomon is appointed king before David dies. So it started the organizational work. Let's get the Levites, everybody organized of what they're going to do. And that's what the next section here in chapters 23 to 26. Levitical offices, the Gershonites, the Kohathites, the Merarites, their duties, specifically what they're going to do. Remember, these are the children of Levi, their descendants. Okay, the divisions within that of who's serving when. The musicians are all organized. And then the gatekeepers, who's going to be watching the gate when, who's going to be watching the treasury, and then the officers and judges outside of Israel as well. So everything now is organized, and I just organize the rest of the nation, so it's an easy transition for Solomon. So who are going to be the commanders of the army? Who are the chief tribal leaders? When it goes to the army, there's 12 divisions of 24,000 that rotate, 12,000 at a time per month. So 1 month, this group, 24,000, next month, the next group, and they're rotating. So he's making this so that it's going to be a very easy transition for his son. And then the overseers over different things. So then David's address concerning the temple, and this is a general address to the people. And then God, how he established David as king, his desire to build a temple, and God's choice of Solomon to do it. And then he addresses Solomon concerning being a wise king and follower of God, verses 9 and 10, and to carry out all the plans for the temple, verses 11 through 21. Then recounts the offerings of the temple. So additional amounts are given beyond what had already been collected. Verse 4 and 5, David personally gives 3,000 talents of gold. It's 225,000 pounds. That's simply what he had. All right, 7,000 talents of silver, that's 525,000 pounds. The ruler's given an additional 5,000 talents and 10,000 derricks of gold, 10,000 talents of silver, 18,000 talents of brass, which is 1,000,035 pounds, 100,000 talents of iron, 7.5 million pounds of iron. And the people also contribute precious stones.
It's amazing how they document the numbers like that, very precise.
Yeah, and they were so big, it was like,
I mean,
it almost is like, could that be real? Could that be true?
yeah, right?
Okay. But remember, in the ancient world, a lot of this gold just went from king to king. As
Yeah.
you conquer, you steal, you get all the gold, and the next guy, he gets all the gold, so it keeps amassing.
Pirates.
So it's being consolidated. So David then prays some key elements. First is there's praise and thanksgiving to God for providing all that has been given for building the temple. And that's where you see some of David's heart too, from a materialistic standpoint. He doesn't care about the stuff. He simply wants God to be praised. So everything he has, let's make that the focus of God. Wow. That's right. Wow. Then he makes intercession that God's going to enable Solomon to walk with God and build the temple. So that's even his prayer for his son, that he actually is going to carry this out. Next comes Solomon's coronation. The next day, many sacrifices made in worship of God, and then he's given a formal crowning as king, even though he already had been designated as king and sat on David's throne. Now it's the coronation. Okay?
What is a coronation?
That's the formal celebration.
Party time.
Okay, that now this is the king. If even in the modern world, if a king dies, then it's so and so is dead, and then it's so and so now is king. Long live the king. So, and then later on, there's going to be a formal ceremony where the king is usually going to take some kind of an oath, and then he's going to give a crown so that it's recognized and given the symbols of power and that kind of stuff. So it's the formal aspect of it. Okay? So it goes back to ancient times. How different countries do it is different, but this is still the same thing going on. All right? So next we go to the reign of Solomon. And Solomon goes to Gibeon. Remember, Gibeon is where Samuel had been. And that is apparently where the ark is currently at, or well, that's where they've been meeting, because the temple's not built yet. So they go up to Gibeon, and there it's for worship. They have sacrifices. He prays, and God gives him a vision. He asks for wisdom, and God grants that. And as well as not only the wisdom, but also all the things he didn't ask for, which included the wealth that most people would probably be after. He just wanted, I need wisdom to rule these people. He understood the responsibilities, and God gave him that, and then also made him very wealthy. All right, so now we're 2 Chronicles, chapter 2, and the building of the temple itself. So preparation for construction. So assemble all the workers. This details the contract he makes with Hiram, king of Tyre, for all the materials that are going to come down there. Because they're hewers of wood, and they have skilled people in putting things together and designing things and all that. So there's a contract with them. They're going to get so many cores of wheat and so many baths of oil. So he's going to supply the king of Tyre with what the king of Tyre needs for his people to live on, and they're going to send down wood. He sends up, and Solomon sets up his own workers as well. There's a lot of those. Construction begins, chapter 3, and then it starts detailing about the temple itself. The size, 60 by 20 cubits. Remember how big a short cubit is?
18 inches?
Yeah, basically 1.5 feet, so that makes it easy to calculate out. The furnishings of the temple. The bronze altar is 20 by 20 by 10 cubits, or 29 by 29 by 15 feet. The bronze sea stands on 12 oxen. It says a hand breadth, and so that's 3 to 4 inches depending on your hand. My hand breadth is bigger than some people. You know what a yard is? This is between the tip of your finger and to the king's nose. So you can have a short yard or a long yard. And that's true.
Really?
Yeah. A cubit.
Okay.
Okay. So you go back to the ancient world, and what did they use? You still measure horses in hands, right?
Huh.
But depending on the size of the person, it could be a lot bigger or smaller depending on. So that's why it's not a very good unit of measure. All right, so that's extra for you, John. Okay. This bronze sea, 3,000 bath. That's at least 18,000 gallons. There's the 10 golden lampstands. There's 10 tables. There's 10 golden bowls and pails and shovels and pillars and capitals, 400 power. I mean, just all this detail about all the material. There's all the furnishings for the temple. Finally, the dedication. The temple is built. It's time for the dedication, and the ark is brought in. Now, it's interesting. I noted here the ark contained at that point only the 2 tablets. What's missing?
Staff. Aaron's
Aaron's rod and the manna.
And the manna.
They're not there anymore. So where they went, nothing records that.
They fill out when Uzzah
Yeah.
dropped in there.
Could have been, or the Philistines, or
Some
the
other
people of
Philistines
Beth
had
Shemesh
for a
took
while.
a gander at down there. Like,
Mhm.
so who knows? But all that's in it at this point are just the 2 tablets. All right, Solomon then has a dedication for this, and the glory of the Lord, even at this, fills the temple itself. The priest can't stay inside the temple. Solomon goes through the dedication. The Lord chose David and Jerusalem to place his name there. Why? Because he simply chose. Heaven and earth can't contain it. This is simply what God has chosen. And that the Lord has now fulfilled this promise he made to David. The temple is now here. And then his prayer. Solomon's prayer is a wonderful, because it really is focused on the character of God and fulfilling his word in verses 14 through 17. That God is transitory, and yet he has chosen to regard the temple as a location for people to pray and make pleas to him. The petition he has is that God is going to heed the prayers and confessions at the temple and grant forgiveness for personal and national sins, to restore them when they're defeated by an enemy, verses 24 to 25, to forgive them when drought comes and to restore them from that, 26 and 27, famine that is a result, 28 through 31, and then also to answer the prayer of foreigners that they may know God's name and fear him. That's his interest there. That even foreigners, when they come, they would understand that this is the true God, because they'll pray and they'll see those prayers answered. There's a granting victory in battle, so that's preempting. If we have to go into battle, that we come and pray here and that you will grant us victory. And then return from captivity when they repent. So apparently Solomon was paying attention to the law of Moses and recognized the reality is when they fail, they're far away, that they're going to be returned. So that's all there. So it's a wonderful prayer. After he prays, the Shekinah glory fills it. That's his brightness, and man can't, that's too much for man. And the priest could not enter the temple area because it was so powerful. Remember, we'd seen the Shekinah before. The glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle the same way, and they were driven out. Now he fills the temple, so you can see the parallels. They understand. God is saying, yes, I have approved this, and you will be able to find me here.
How do you pronounce that word?
Shekinah.
Shekinah?
Uh-huh. Shekinah. All right, after this, they celebrate a 7-day feast, followed by a day of solemn assembly, and then another 7-day dedicated to the altar, followed by 7 more feast days. The people are then sent away on the 23rd day.
Big party.
That is quite a party, and Solomon has provided all this. And the officials, you know, it tells you how many, you know, sheep were killed, and the cows and everything else they have provided, and raisin cakes that came and everything else. 23 days of celebrating. That's a lot.
That's
You know, you get fat on that.
continuous.
The people came and they waddled home. All right, then the Lord's confirmation, the covenant, chapter 7. He affirms his answer to Solomon's prayer to pay attention to the prayer offered up at or toward the temple, but also gives a stern warning about walking in his ways and to have him to continue on the throne. And that disobedience, especially idolatry, would ultimately lead to God abandoning the temple. So right when it's built, he gives this warning. If idolatry is what comes in, I will abandon it. He's not going to share his glory with anything else. As you're going through Chronicles, you can see that becomes the emphasis. There's a lot of horrible things that go on in a failing government. Kings will recount that, the bloodshed that goes on, robbery and everything else. Chronicles keeps emphasizing the idolatry. The other is true, but it keeps emphasizing because this matches what he had said. If that's what's going on, I will remove my glory from it. All right, so the Lord confirms it. Next we go to Solomon's accomplishments, and in brief, it becomes, well, he built the temple, he built his own house, He built all sorts of cities that he got by Hiram, cities captured in Hamath, which is the northeast area above the Shan. The storage cities were forcing to remain condemned people into forced labor, and he tells you how many. So he had slaves. That's basically it. Those who were the Canaanites were still in the land, he made them as slaves. All right, they were the forced labor. He built a house for his wife, Pharaoh's daughter, and then keeping the sacrificial calendar and feast, and establishing then a sea trade as well. And he has quite an extensive trade all over the place, the things that they're bringing in. The Queen of Sheba comes up, and certainly you can summarize that. The half was not told to her of when the Queen of Sheba comes, of the glory that is there related to Solomon and his wisdom, and it recounts some of that. She blessed God because of it, verse 8, and then she brought all sorts of gifts to him, and so there was never spices before or after as what she brought up. So the food was a whole lot better during that period of time with all the spicing, and then he gave gifts to her, verse 12. Then it recounts in verses 13 to 28 of chapter 9 his extreme wealth, and gives a lot of detail of it. 666 talents of gold per year are coming to him. That's 49,950 pounds per year. I know, you would just like 1 pound, right? Just 16 ounces would just be hunky-dory, right?
Oh my goodness.
So this is what's coming in per year. He made gold shields, 27 pounds of gold per large shield and 13.5 in a small shield. He made silver as common as stones. Silver was not considered valuable.
Imagine doing that today.
Was not even considered valuable. Cedar as common as sycamores. Sycamores were a common tree in any of the valleys and any of the river areas going out. It's just a very common tree. As common as that were cedars. They came down from Lebanon. 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, 12,000 horsemen, and then verse 22, greater than all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. And that's Solomon. And all because God simply granted it. That was God's doing, period. Solomon's death is recounted. He had many wives, and concubines are not mentioned. It doesn't deal with that. It doesn't deal with his being turned to them by idols. There's only the turmoil as last year's or prophecy for a split kingdom. So again, it's a change in emphasis from kings. This is more about God's faithfulness than man's unfaithfulness. All right, now we start running down the kings of Judah. Anybody need a break? Do you need a break, John?
Whatever. Fine, but
I do have a question though. Does it ever, well, it doesn't say that in the passage, but is there any indication of potentially what he did with the gold and silver itself? Did he just let it sit there as a status symbol, or is he paying people with it? Or, I mean, you can't really do much with a large percentage of it.
He seems to have been good at business because it talks about how much gold it would cost him to buy chariots and horses from Egypt. But then it talks about him selling it to other places. So he seems to be trading. A lot of it would be just going into the treasury. A lot would be going into paying whoever needed it. Now you've got an army that's massive. You've got all this staff. He's got to be paying them. He's got to be supplying for them. So I'm sure that gets pretty expensive. So I don't think it's like there's 666 talents of gold and it's just, okay, just sitting there. A lot of that's going, it goes here, here, here. It's paying for all sorts of things. Trades would be part of it. And remember, if he's trading, that means there's products from Israel that are going out to trade for these things. And it says there's gold of Ophir, there's, was it apes and peacocks and
Camels were coming in.
camels are coming out. It's just all sorts of things. This is trade. You know, if we had, so it's all kind of coming in through him. if we did that for any nation, saying here's what our trade value is of what's coming into our nation, it would always sound like a lot. But then you have to balance that out with this, but we're also trading, there's expenses going out. If, well, Ecclesiastes talks about the more money you have personally coming in to you, the more expenses you have. There will always be more people who want to eat it up.
Children.
Not just children, okay? It's just, you'll find all sorts of people that suddenly, read these stories of people who win the lottery, right?
Yes.
A lot of them are more miserable
Yes.
afterward, and some end up in more impoverished than beforehand because they're descended on and they don't know how to handle it, and it goes quickly. So it would be a lot of things that be used from it. So it wouldn't just, don't think of it as here it is and it's just sitting someplace. It's being used for all sorts of stuff. But there's his wealth.
All that gold and silver, were they taxable? Were they taxed back then?
Well, that's what he was getting.
I mean, that-
Those are tax revenues.
That's
Some
his,
of that's
there's
tax
his,
They are
revenue.
the
there's his tax and
Yeah.
business revenues.
Right.
Right.
Okay? If you just think, he's got 12,000 horsemen. That's got to cost you something. He's got to feed the horse
Feed the men, pay the men.
and feed the men. But I just say, eat like a horse. It's not cheap to keep a horse. And that's in modern times. Think about it then. How long did it take you to get all the stuff you need just to feed a horse and keep them in training? You got people trained to keep your chariots and keep all. It's going to be expensive. So we know he taxed a lot because when he gets to Rehoboam, which we're going to get to next, they want the burden removed from them, lessen this burden. So let's take a short break. I'm going to go grab something to drink, and then we'll start back
Who
up.
was the one who invented tax?
Who invented taxes?
Yeah.
The devil.
Most,
He's probably a Democrat, right?
Very clear.
Stop it.
Modern
Jim,
one, not an
Jim,
ancient,
stop
not an
it.
old one. done all that.
Yeah, but never realized.
If you got through the deacon process, you already done
Yeah,
quarters of it.
That's
So.
true.
Of course, that last quarter is.
Okay,
We'll
go.
start again.
Okay, back.
All right, so kings of Judah. I'm probably going to forget where I told you to stop, so stop me when I get to the point where you say, I haven't read about that yet. Because I went through all the way to the end. All right, so Rehoboam. Rehoboam, Solomon's son. And according to the prophecy given, that's recorded in Kings, it's going to split. And Chronicles does list the reason why. He doesn't listen to wise counsel. And this split, it mentioned specifically, is because this was according to the Lord's plan. Although it doesn't give all the particular details to find in Kings. After it splits, chapter 11, we find that Rehoboam is going, he finds out the split is real when he sends his tax collector up and they kill him. And he flees. And so he amasses an army, and he's going to go up and he's going to force the issue. And a prophet comes and warns him not to do it, and so he does. He backs down. He begins to strengthen his own hands. He builds fortified cities, defensive cities. The Levitical priests leave Israel for the most part. Jeroboam is not going to have them continue. Later on, there's even a phrase talking about another king much later on is, how do these priests get into Jeroboam's false religion? Basically pay the price and you can become a priest. And so a lot of the Levites have even abandoned their cities and they come down to Judah. Some of the people from Israel leave Israel and they come to Judah because they're going to continue to worship the Lord. But it's not until Jeroboam sets up this false worship. And they realize there could be a division where they're not going to be able to come back and forth. And it talks about his family then size increases as well. Let's see. One thing, his family size increases if you follow out who he marries. He's marrying first and second cousins. So it's solidifying it within his own family. Royalty seems to have this thing about doing that. We don't want to get outside the family, so it's a lot of intermarriage within the family. Kingdom of Judah is then invaded and plundered. This is Shishak of Egypt comes in, and is specifically related to Rehoboam and Judah's being unfaithful to the Lord, verse 12. And so God uses the Pharaoh from Egypt comes up, and they're defeated, and so God uses that to humble them, and when they humble themselves, then he gives them a measure of deliverance. Only a measure of it. Shishak plunders Jerusalem, but he retains the throne, and he reigns another 12 years. So this should be the first warning that if you don't follow me, this is what will happen. But if you don't know your history, you're bound and determined to repeat it. And yet that happens over and over and over again, and it even happens in our own lifetime. If you know history, you can see we're doing this. We do the same kind of stupid things that has happened in generations before us, thinking somehow we're wiser. It's already been proven. Even this whole push for increased socialism, it's already been proven it doesn't work. Everywhere it's been tried, it doesn't work. Even China had to realize they had to go to a more capitalistic system in order to make it. Doesn't work, but yet we do it. These kings should have known from this point on. Rehoboam dies. Part of his problem, his mother was an Ammonitess, and verse 13 is very specific. His evil was because he did not set his heart to seek the Lord. That's where all the root of it came from the very beginning. He did not set his heart to seek the Lord. Following him is Abijah. Now, I think you're just going to start to notice that a lot of these names are spelled differently at a later time. It can just be some of the just how do you pronounce the name, and you may spell it differently, trying to match that. Pronunciations do change over time. Some of it is a lot of people have more than one name, all right, and so they may go by different names. Even my son Jonathan, as he got older into his late teens, a lot of his friends started calling him John, right? You've had that, haven't you?
Yes.
But what does your mother still call you? Yeah, well, we do the same thing with him. It's like, that's the name we gave you, so that's what it's still going to be. But he's now using it to his advantage. He'll go by John in some circles and Jonathan in other circles. My dad did that. His name is Edward Hewin in the South. Your middle name is often what you're known by, and then your first name is a formal name, maybe for business. My mom did not even know my dad's first name until they got married.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. It kept running into the people calling him Ed. He's like, well, who's Ed? You know, it's me. It's like, what? So don't get lost in that just because it's a different spelling or even maybe a different name. It's referring to the same person. All right, we still do the same thing today. 1 Kings also 15 also states he was evil like Rehoboam. And the problem is he did not seek the Lord like David did. That's how it's referenced here in Chronicles. Chronicles, though, highlights this man's success in war against Jeroboam of Israel because he did trust the Lord, verses 12 through 15. Jeroboam did not recover after there was a war between the two. Why? Because he was struck from the Lord and died. That becomes a difference between the emphasis between the two, where there's, between Kings and Chronicles, where there's an effort to show what it meant to trust the Lord in success, it's going to emphasize that. But his heart was not set the same way as it should be. He did not seek the Lord like David. That was his fall. He wasn't really where he should have been. But where he did trust the Lord, God honored that. Next comes Asa, and a lot of early victories. He did good and what was right in the sight of the Lord. Then it goes on in early part of chapter 14 how he removed the idolatry that had been generated from the time of Solomon through Abijah. And then it said he defeated Ethiopia, verse 11, because he called upon the Lord. Now Azariah the prophet then warns Asa against forsaking the Lord, and when he does that, Asa institutes even more reforms. And then he had a later victory over Baasha of Israel, but this is where folly comes in. So he starts really well, but in chapter 16 we find it doesn't continue that way. All right, he defeats Baasha or Baasha by making a treaty with Aram to come down and attack him. And a prophet, a seer, rebukes him for this, and then he imprisons that prophet, and God strikes Asa with a disease in his feet, and yet he still didn't turn back to the Lord, and he dies 2 years later having reigned for 41 years. So you can start well, do you finish well? You also are going to see some examples of the opposite. So he started off great. You think you'd learn from that, I'll just keep doing this, but pride comes in and he thinks he knows better. Jehoshaphat is a, sorry I didn't keep up with that, later victories, rebuke and folly, and his death. All right, Jehoshaphat. Now he followed David's example, and so he's a good king. And so God established his reign and gave him peace. So the fear of the Lord was upon all the nations around him. So no, there's no war. And when there's no war, you can build. And so he strengthens his kingdom very quickly. And then he makes a foolish alliance. He has his son marry a daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, Athaliah. And then he allied himself with Ahab for war. This is foolishness, and it ends up hurting Judah from then on. Micaiah, the prophet, even warns him about being in alliance with Ahab, and he continues on. This prophet tells him, you know, this is what's going to happen. They're going to die. Or Ahab's going to die. Now it's interesting in that whole story dealing with them. They have these prophets come in. It's all positive. You're going to defeat them, etc., etc. And then Ahab or Jehoshaphat says, "Isn't there a prophet of the Lord?" Now, who are these other ones then? They're the ones following Jeroboam's religion. So they're not following the Lord as they should. They may think they are, but they're actually not. So they had this other guy come in, and he first gives them, "Okay, you want to hear this? I'll tell you what you want to hear." And he just, "You need to tell me the truth." And he tells them the truth. You're going to die. And he still goes out anyways. I mean, it's like, do you want to know or not? Puts him in prison, and his last word is like, "If you indeed come back, then the Lord has not spoken through me." And of course he didn't come back. He was killed. Jehoshaphat is able to flee, but it was a foolish alliance. Jehu actually rebukes Jehoshaphat for helping Ahab. And so when Jehoshaphat gets back to Jerusalem, he actually institutes a lot of reforms. That includes making sure there's godly judges, and then making sure the appointments of the Levites to do the same thing. So he actually took to heart this rebuke. Chapter 20, he has victory over an invasion by Moab, Ammon, and the Mennonites. And his combat strategy is interesting. The first thing they do is they have a prayer meeting. And they pray diligently. Because they recognize they could be in trouble here. The army coming against them is large. And Jehaziel tells them the Lord is going to fight the battle for them. And so they have a strange way of going out with their army. Normally you put men of war in front. They don't. They put singers in front. And they put priests blowing trumpets and they're recounting the praises of God. Because they're told is, you're not going to have to do anything. You're going to get there and you're going to watch the Lord do it. When they get there, the nations that had formed an alliance to go attack Judah attack each other and wiped each other completely out. Two of them against one, and then these two fought it out until no one's left. And they got there, and they're all dead. They're just corpses. 3 days they spend just trying to get the plunder. And then they cart it off, and then they spend 1 day just in giving praise to God. That actually area where that happened is over by the Herodian, if you ever go to Israel. It's right at that spot. So, an interesting way to have a battle. Just go out praising God with your, you know, the praise band goes first. And they watched it, so it's a fantastic story. Interesting that that's not recounted in Kings, it's recounted here, because again, here's this emphasis upon God and His faithfulness. His reign overall, there's a summary of it in the end of chapter 20. God gave Jehoshaphat peace. The end of the reign, he made an alliance with Ahaziah, king of Israel, and is rebuked for it. And their trade venture, where they're going to do something together, is completely destroyed. They're going to start doing trading together. And he's rebuked. And so it comes to nothing because God destroys their ships. So, among sure that don't be unequally yoked. That's what he did. So that's Jehoshaphat. So victory over invaders, evaluation of his reign at the end of the chapter. Next is Jehoram. Jehoram is evil. He is not the oldest, but he's established by his father as king. Even so, he murders his brothers. That's the first thing he does. No, doesn't want anybody challenging it. And why is he so evil? He is married to Ahab's daughter.
Yep.
Here's where the problem comes. Edom and Libnah revolt because of Jehoram had forsaken the Lord. Verse 10, Elijah prophesied his end in which his family and his possessions will be taken from him, and he'll die with sickness, and the prophecy is fulfilled in verses 16 through 20. Murdered his brothers, married Ahab's daughter, revolt of the nations that had been under control of his father. Elijah prophesies his end, the family possessions are taken, and his descendants die in calamity. So then it's fulfilled. After him is Ahaziah. He also is evil. He walks in the ways of Ahab, who is his grandfather. And he makes an alliance with Jehoram, king of Israel, who is his cousin. And in Jehu's rebellion against Jehoram, he's killed as well, because he also is a direct descendant from Ahab. Now this sets up a strange thing that happens, is the only female who rules is Athaliah. She's the daughter of Ahab, and when her husband is killed, instead of letting the reign go to a son, she starts killing all the royal offspring. Okay, now remember, they had more than one wife, so it's not just her own children, it's all the rest. If anybody has a claim to the throne, she starts knocking them off, she's going to reign. And so she does. Now, Joash's aunt, it's an aunt, okay? It's Jehoram's sister. She hides, her name is Jehoshabeath, or Shashabath, is Jehosh Ba'ath. Okay, so I guess it's a feminine version of Jehoshaphat is like, it's feminized from Jehoshaphat is all I can really think of, because that would be a descendant. And she hides Joash. And then she and her husband, because she's married to Jehoiada, who's the high priest, that's who she's married to, they hide him. And they hide him for 6 years. In the 7th year, it's now time to bring him out. And they do bring him out, and they arrange him, they proclaim him king. Athaliah is treason, treason. She comes down over the temple, sees this, and they take her over and they kill her by the horse gate into the king's house. And so she's finally put to death. She's an evil woman, and how evil can you be? You start killing off. I mean, murder, murder, murder. So now she is put to death. And Joash is an interesting fellow. He's very young, and so Jehoiada is basically, and those around him are the ones who are actually leading. They're directing him because he's too young. He's only 7. How to do it, and he does very well as long as Jehoiada is alive. You know, probably he has respect for him. But he does excellent during that whole period of time. Let me get to Athaliah, I think. So Athaliah, daughter of Ahab, killed all the other offspring. Ahaziah was dead in order to the queen. Jehoshabeath, and hides is 6 years old. 7th year Jehoiada arranged for Joash to be proclaimed. Athaliah is executed. So now we got to Joash. So the influence of Jehoiada is good, and as he gets a little older, he takes on reforms, and so you can see there's some good things coming out of that. And he actually rebukes Jehoiada as the temple is falling in disrepair. Let's get this thing fixed. So those are very good. A rebuke to the priest. Why is the temple in disrepair? It arranges for a collection according to the Mosaic levy that's supposed to be on it, and the temple's being repaired. But he turns to evil. Jehoiada dies, And he lives a long time. I forgot what it was, 130?
130 years.
Yeah, he's old. And so during that whole period of time, he does well. But after Jehoiada dies, other counselors start getting his ear, and he starts listening to them. And the more he listens to them, the more he turns away from the Lord and serving the Lord, and so he starts serving the Asherim, the idols. All that's going to end up in God's wrath, even though God sent prophets to warn. So there's a lot of people that are like that. As long as someone godly has their ear, they'll follow what's going on, but they don't seem to ever have conviction themselves. As soon as that influence is gone and there's a negative influence, now they're following that, because they don't seem to really be able to make up their own mind and make their own decisions. So because of that, he ends up so bad, he turns to idolatry along with them, and then he murders Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada. Now, understand, that would be a fellow who would either be, like an uncle to him, or an older brother to him, because he's raised in Jehoiada's house. And yet he has him murdered, because he's opposing and correcting him. Because of this, the Lord allows Judah's very large army to be defeated by a very small army from Aram. So it's the opposite of what happens when you're trusting the Lord. Now it's okay, it'll go the other direction. You will be punished. He was evil enough at this point that he's murdered as revenge for the murder of Jehoiada's son, Zechariah. And he's not even buried with the rest of the kings. So again, here's another guy. He starts off well, bad counsel, listens to it, and he ends terrible. Absolutely terrible. Amaziah follows him. He was 25 years old when he took over, and he reigned for 29 years total. And he does what is right and trusts God, but it says not with his whole heart. He defeats the Edomites without the hired mercenaries from Israel. He had actually hired them 100 talents of silver, and the prophet said, you don't need them. God will defeat these without them. And he does win. He defeats them. But then two things go wrong. First is, he defeats them, but he grabs their idols. And he brings the idols back with him and sets them up, and he starts worshiping the idols of the nation which he just defeated. Now, something even logically is wrong there. Okay? But that's what he does. The second is these people that he had hired as mercenaries, he sends them back, and they're mad. Why would they be mad? It's because they expected to be able to come, be part of this army, and take part in the spoils of war. Now all they do is they just have their pay. And as they go back, they actually attack some of the cities in Judah and spoil them and take that back with them. Because Amaziah had turned his heart toward worshiping these idols, then God allows Israel to have a war with him, and he is defeated. In verses 27, there's a conspiracy made against him. He flees to Lachish, which is south in the Shephelah, and he's murdered. So another one. He starts well, it looks like it could be good, and then he goes off.
That's what we read through, right?
Okay. Yeah, they just had to go through 25?
25, yeah.
Okay, so we'll stop there. If you've read everything, if everybody's read everything, I'll go continue, but if you haven't, I'll stop there.
What do we read for next week? Oh, there may not be.
You're going to read through the rest of Chronicles.
Yeah.
And then I have it down there through Isaiah. There's a lot Isaiah.
I just finished.
Isaiah 1 through 35, that gives you a total of 46 chapters to read. And then next week we'll finish up Isaiah. If we don't have class next week, just continue to go through all of Isaiah, is what I'll probably do the week after that, because there's not that much in Chronicles.
It's done with Isaiah.
Is I can do that and Isaiah the week after. do make sure I have your email, so I can let you know if there will or will not be class, and that's going to depend on how well Diane's doing. If she comes home and she's doing great, and I can leave her for a couple hours, we'll come over and we'll have class. If she's not, then, well, we won't. Because I also have to figure, I have to be able to actually get the class prepared and all this done, so I have to get Isaiah done. Some of that may depend too, because obviously if there's, if we get snowed out on Sunday, I'll have a sermon ready already, so I'll be ready for the next week. So we'll just play it by ear.
On Saturday.
You want me to preach on Saturday?
Yeah.
I won't be done by Saturday. But I'll tell you what, go to the website
Yep.
and you can listen to an older sermon. All
I
right?
own it, yep.
You can listen to them any day of the week, including Saturday. All right, let's pray, and I'll let you go home, or if you have any questions, I'll answer any questions. Thank you, Father, for the truth of your word, and as we see these kinds of examples in the Old Testament, Father, prod us to take to heart what is there. These men, many of them who start well but finish very poorly because their heart gets turned. Do not let us be like that. Let us be like some of the examples I know that are coming up, that serve you with a whole heart all the way through. Father, it would be much better to start poorly and end well than start well and end poorly. Thank you that those examples are there because you are a God of mercy and grace. Father, pleased to change people and glorify yourself in that manner. In Jesus' name, amen. Any questions?